Let's pick up on that earlier interview, that we had with Sharon Ekambaram from Lawyers for Human Rights. The EFF yesterday visited businesses demanding to inspect staff complements to ensure South Africans are given preference. Sharon, if we can just pick up with you on the line because the internet was not playing ball for us. What does the Constitution say about giving jobs to locals over people here who are legally here but not from South Africa?
So, as I was refugee, you have the right to work in South Africa, and that's part of the Act. And it's taking into account the fact that you've come in your country and that we are providing you with a safe haven as you and your family deal with that situation. We have various policies that address other forms of skills, and there's procedures that can enable you to get documented. But I think that that's the critical point, that both our asylum system and the ability of people to get documentation to remain, within the law in our country is in crisis. And I think this is in the broader context of a serious problem with the inability of this government to provide decent services, whether that's service delivery at a very basic level, or with respect to enabling people to get documented as they come into our country. And I think that is a major crisis that needs to be addressed. But I think more broadly than that, we are failing in how we are embracing and engaging with the movement of people in our region. And what is unfortunate is that it is predominantly black African people from the African continent of which we are a part. And what we are seeing being played out today, and which has been played out for many, many years now, is a vigilantism and xenophobia, which is fueled by very reckless, unsubstantiated statements being made by politicians as they scramble to get votes in a populist way, because they are failing to win over the confidence of South Africans voting, because they are doing their work and they're delivering services, and that local government is functioning in the way that it should do as per our constitution and various policies that we have in place.
Sharon, if you look back in history, this aggressive anti-migrant politics is usually a scapegoat for failed governance. But what right do politicians such as the EFF or even civilians have to march into private businesses and ask for people's papers? It feels like Kristallnacht, or it feels a little bit to me like asking for a passbook.
Well, I mean, it's unlawful. We have just released and endorsed and enforced a policy on protection of information. And this, is a critical thing that businesses should be respecting, that no one can simply come in and ask you for information about your employees and what their status is. So there are policies and procedures to do this. But I do want to go back to that. It is very, very reckless. It fuels violence like we are seeing in Soweto. And it's actually spreading misinformation. The fact that the migrants are taking all the jobs, and it's very, very, the intention is to divert away from, as you pointed out, the failure of the state to ensure that there is decent work for people in this country. The state has not intervened when the private sector has rampaged through with its policies of outsourcing, where jobs are lost. The fact that the rich are getting richer in this country have been unaffected by things like COVID, while the poorest continue to pay the price. It's only the poorest in our country, both South Africans and migrants, a tiny percentage of migrants. We have less than 3 million migrants in our country. You cannot blame that population for the major social ills, which of course are a consequence of our past. It is the consequence of the heinous policies of apartheid. But, going over 2 decades into our democracy, this government has failed to transform this country. And this is the consequence. So it's easy to blame the migrants when we have failed to ensure equality. We still remain one of the most unequal societies in the world, and that is unsustainable. And this violence will continue. The violence we saw in July was nothing short of food riots, where people are struggling. And the answer is not to attack your fellow most vulnerable. The answer is to hold our government to account, and that is the only way we can strengthen our democracy.
Thank you so much, Sharon Ekambaram of Lawyers for Human Rights.